Good afternoon. My name is Ben Roll. I'm an application engineer with Ally PLM Solutions. I want to welcome all of you to the Ally PLM Lunch Byte series. These sessions are designed to briefly explore the capabilities within Solid Edge that are often overlooked. Once again, if you don't know by now, we hold these sessions every other Thursday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central. In today's session, we'll be covering the 2D schematic capabilities of Solid Edge. If you have any questions regarding today's session, please write them down and send them to us in an email. We have a lot of you on the line today, so you will all be in listen-only mode. That way we don't get feedback from speakerphones. Like I said, today we're going to cover the schematics tool in Solid Edge. First, we're going to look at blocks and Autocad blocks, and then we'll go into drawing connectors and placing labels. Basically, all a block is a collection of 2D geometry that behaves like a single entity. It's similar to a group or a rigid set of sketches. You'll notice over here I have a screenshot. You have the folder that you're looking at and then the contents of that folder. And then the second pane is the library where it shows your active document and the document that you're looking at from the folders as your library. And it also shows all of the blocks that are contained in both the active document and the one you're using as your library. When you create a block, the last step is to give it a name, and in that step you have two options that are turned on by default. One option is called Scale Dimensions and Annotations. What this option does is if you have any annotations or dimensions in your block, if you change the scale of the block, then the size of those dimensions and annotations will increase or decrease with respect to the scale. The other option is Place Occurrence. What that option does is it will take the geometry and turn it into a block instead of leaving that geometry there and then still creating the block. This is useful a lot of times if you're making a switch and you know that you're going to create multiple views of that switch, like an open view, a closed view, or if it has multiple multiple points that you can pick. Another feature is if you create a block and give it the same name as one that already exists, you'll get a message from Solid Edge and it will give you the option to either give it a new name or to overwrite the existing block and use the new geometry. So once you've defined the block, it will be shown in your active document list in the library. And all you have to do to add that block to your actual document as far as an instance of that block, you just select it and drag it into the draft document, same way you would drag in a part to an assembly. The only difference is when you drag that in, it won't automatically place it. It will connect it to your cursor at a handle point, which you will define as the origin. And when you define that origin, that is also the point that it will rotate about when you go to rotate that block. And you can rotate it by pressing the A or the S key on your keyboard, and it will rotate it in increments of 45 degrees. One of the really nice features about the Solid Edge blocks is that you're given the ability to create and save multiple blocks inside of a single draft file. And this allows you to create libraries of blocks instead of having to save each individual block out as its own draft file. Now we've got a few more slides I just want to let you guys know that this is a little longer on the PowerPoint side, but at the end we will go through and demo all of these things, but there's a lot of information that we need to get through first. The other nice thing about the library is that because you're able to create a library, you can also select a block from any draft document and use that in your current draft document. So like I mentioned in that screenshot, it's over here on the right side of the screen again, you can select the block library draft file that you're going to use from your folder, and then it's located in the library view down below the active document. You'll see it pointed out down here. And you can just drag from that onto your draft file and it will automatically place an occurrence of that block in your active document. One thing you'll notice in the list of the blocks is this little icon next to it that has 4 squares, and that is the usage indicator. So when an occurrence of that block is being used in your draft file, that icon will change to have a push pin in it, and that icon will change when you place the first occurrence. That's when it'll appear, and then when you delete all of the occurrences, then that push pin will disappear. You also have the ability to replace blocks, so you can either right-click on the block in the draft file and choose to replace it there, and if you do that, you can either replace that single occurrence or you can replace all the occurrences. Alternatively, you can select it from the edge bar and choose replace there, and what that'll do is replace every occurrence of the block. In addition to creating and using Solid Edge blocks that are provided with Solid Edge, you can also convert Autocad blocks. To do that, you might have to adjust the filter in the edge bar so that it will display Autocad documents. But what's nice about being able to bring those in is that Solid Edge will automatically translate them when you drag them in. You don't have to go through and translate them first. So you'll be able to drag them in the same way you would a Solid Edge block, and it will automatically convert it and list it in your active documents. So like I mentioned, Solid Edge comes preloaded with several blocks already created for you. They have a fairly large library. They have it divided up into 3 main sections. They have electrical, mechanical, and piping. And you'll see here some examples of the many blocks that come preloaded with Solid Edge. So now we're going to look at the connectors, and there are 4 different types of connectors. There's the line, the jump, corner, and the step. And then you can also choose a start icon and an ending icon, so it could be an arrow, a dot, or just blank, and we'll look at that when we get into the demo. You'll notice here we have handles marked on each of the connectors. So for the jump and the step, you'll notice that they have 3 handles. For the jump, that allows you to position that actual jump for the connector, and for the step, that allows you to adjust the shape of the connector. The last thing we're going to talk about in the PowerPoint are the block labels. So there's actually a block label command that you can use in Solid Edge to create a label. The first thing that you put in is the name, and you have to fill something in there. You can't just leave it blank. It doesn't have to be unique within the block or even within the document. So basically what you use the name for is you can use it to identify a part type, a part number, or part usage, or just to provide some notes. If you don't include if you don't include a value in the block definition, then that name is what is always going to be displayed. And if you create the label instead of in the master block, if you create it just at the occurrence, then it's also going to display the name. The next thing for you to fill in is the value. And you have two different options when you fill in the value. You can either type something in there, or you can leave it blank, or you can use the property text, and that property text will update automatically. The nice thing about the value is that you can use it to place a unique value in each occurrence of the block. So to do that, you'll just mark the option to ask for a value during the block placement, and that'll allow you to place a unique value, or you can put a value in there that you will use for all of the occurrences. So that's the main stuff for the block label. Now I'll go ahead and switch over to the demo. So like I mentioned, Solid Edge comes preloaded with a lot of sample blocks for you to use. So first I'll go ahead and show you how to get to those. You'll notice over here I went ahead and pinned the library open. That way it's open all the time and I don't have to keep going back to it. So I'll just go in here to the folder and I'll go to the C drive or wherever you have Solid Edge installed, and then just in the program files and the Solid Edge folder. And you'll have a folder called sample blocks. And if you go in there, you can get to all the different libraries that come preloaded. So I'll just go ahead and shrink these and go into mechanical, and you can see down here at the bottom it will show a preview. So just go ahead and show you a few of the things that come preloaded with Solid Edge. So now we'll go back to our folder where the file that we're using is kept. And I'll show you how to go ahead and create a block. So here we have some geometry. It's not defined as a block, so we'll go ahead and use that. To define the block, you just go into the sketching toolbar and come over to the block command. The first thing you'll do is select the geometry that you want to use as the block. So I'll just go ahead and Windows select all of this and then accept that. And now you'll pick the origin. And like I mentioned in the PowerPoint, the origin is the point that your cursor will be fixed to when you go to drag in that block, and it's also the point that the block will rotate about when you go to rotate it. So now you have the option to put in a name. So I'll just go ahead and name this. And then over here are the options that I mentioned in the PowerPoint. This first one is the place block occurrence, and I have that turned off because we're making a switch, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to create a different view of the switch. And it's easiest to just leave this as geometry so that I can use that to create the view. The next option is that scale dimensions and annotations, and I'll just leave that checked even though I don't have any in this block. But that just makes it so if I place a block and I increase or decrease the scale, then the size of the dimensions and annotations will increase and decrease with respect to that scale. So I'll go ahead and accept that block. And then over here in the active document view of the library, you'll see that this break switch block has been created. You'll also notice that the icon next to it, it doesn't have a push pin in it because we don't actually have an occurrence of that block in the draft file. So now we'll go to making a closed view of the switch. So I'll just select the geometry that I want to change, and I'll slide this down so that we get a closed view of the switch. And now I'll come back over to the library and right-click on the break switch block, and I'll go to Add Block View. And when you create a new view, it's exactly the same process as creating a block. So once again, I'll just window select this, accept that, and then I'll place the origin. And now I'll give the view a name. So since this is a closed configuration, I'll just go ahead and call it closed. And now you'll see over in the library that the break switch block has been expanded, and we have view 1, which I'll go ahead and rename as open. And we also have closed, and you'll see the preview down at the bottom update depending on which one you have selected. Now I'm not going to bring that block in right away. I'll bring it in when I go over the labels. But now we're going to look at the bringing in Autocad blocks. So to do that, I have this mechanical components DWG file. So I'll just select that, and it'll appear the same way as the Solid Edge draft file down here in the library. So you'll see the different blocks that are contained in it, and I'll just select this one and I'll drag it in the same way I would a native Solid Edge block, and Solid Edge will convert it to a block, and I can place it or rotate it the same way I would a normal block. Now what we want to look at are the connectors. So I'll zoom in to this section up here where we have the signal lights. Now first, you'll notice that we're missing one of them. So I'll just go into the active document, since we already have one occurrence of it, and I'll just drag that in, and then I'll hit A on my keyboard to rotate it, and I'll just line it up with these two and place it. It's that easy to place blocks. Now we want to connect the signals. So to do that, still in the sketching toolbar, and this time under the annotations group, we go to the connector, and you'll notice we have the 4 shapes that I mentioned to select from, and we also have the start and the end, and that's where you can pick what appears at the start and the end of the connector. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and leave it as blank, and we're going to go ahead and use the step to connect this signal to this one at the top. Now for the step in the corner, they have 2 different orientations, and you'll notice that this one, it comes off to the side of the block, but we want it to be vertical like the rest of these. So to flip that, you can either use the flip button up here, or you can just hit the F button on your keyboard and that will flip it. So I'll just bring this connector up to here, and then you'll notice I can go ahead and place the next connector right away. I don't have to go back into the command and choose it again. So I'll go ahead and switch to a corner, and then I'll flip it again and bring it down to this block. So that's, easy way to make all of these connections. Now you'll notice that with a step, you might not want this positioned the way it is. So you just click on it, and you have this handle in the middle, and you can just drag that handle and adjust the shape of the connection. Now what we want to do is connect this switch over here to these signals. So to do that, we'll go ahead and go back into the connector, and we'll use a corner again, and we're going to start at the switch and then connect into this wire. So we'll change the end condition to be a dot to signify that it's a connection. Once again, we'll use the step, and I'll start over here, and I'll just come over to this wire and accept that. And you'll notice that we have this dot at the end. I'll go ahead and select it and drag that handle over to adjust the shape. The next thing we want to do is add a ground to this signal. To do that, we'll just, if you have a bunch of blocks in your active document, sometimes it might be easier if you're reusing one. Instead of dragging in a new occurrence of it, you can select it and hold down the Control key on your keyboard and just drag it to wherever you want it, and that will copy it. So now that we have the ground there, we want to go ahead and connect it to the signal. So we'll go back up to the connections, and we'll use a step again, and we'll change this end back to blank. And for this one, you'll notice that these are a little bit thicker than the other connections that I placed. So to change that, we'll just go to the connector line width and pick a little bit thicker one. We'll start at that block, come down to the ground. And you'll notice that it's horizontal coming off of the block, so I'll go ahead and flip that and then place it. And you'll notice that it went down through the block, which we don't want, but we'll just go ahead and go back to our select tool, select that connector, and just drag the handle up to change the shape. Now we're going to look at the jump type of connector, and we'll use that to connect this signal all the way to this switch, and we'll just go ahead and bypass this signal for now to save time. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with a corner, and I'll bring that over here, and now I'll switch to the jump connector, and you'll notice it has that jump in the middle of the line. I'll just bring that down, and then I'll bring another one over to jump over this yellow one. And I'll switch back to the corner and connect it to the switch. And you'll notice that even though we're jumping over these two, the actual jump isn't connected to them. So we'll just go ahead and select it, and if you want, you can adjust the jump radius, so maybe we'll make it a little bit bigger. And then we'll drag this handle and connect it to where the jump is actually going to take place. We'll do the same for this one down here, and drag it over here. And the nice thing about the jump, when you connect it to the other wire that's going to jump over, if I select that other connector and drag it, you'll notice that it automatically updates the position of that jump so that it stays aligned to the connector that it's jumping over. The other nice feature is you'll notice down here we have a line connector that goes over a jump, and it's jumping down here, but we don't have a jump where these two cross. So I can just select this line and change the shape from line to jump, and it will automatically place that where it needs to be. So now that we've covered pretty much everything with the connectors, we're going to look at ways of labeling the blocks, and even one way that you can use to label the connectors. So this first way is probably the simplest, but it's also something that you would use to label special occasions. You wouldn't use it to label absolutely everything in your document because it'd be way too time consuming, and you can just use the block label to make it easier when you place the blocks to have a label attached to them. So what we'll do is we'll add a call out, and we'll just go ahead and call this yellow. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn off the leader because I don't really need it. I'm going to position the call out close to what it's labeling. You can leave the leader on if you want, but I'm just going to turn it off, and then I'll go ahead and apply the call out to this yellow connector, and I'll go ahead and place it. And now the nice thing about the call out is if I again select this connector and I adjust where it's positioned, you'll notice that not only does the jump adjust, but it also adjusts where that call out is. So that's a way to keep the label connected to either your block or your connector. Now we're going to look at the actual block label command. So I'll go ahead and zoom back in here, and I'll just delete this geometry because we don't really need it anymore. And now in the active document, I'll go ahead and select the break switch, and I'll drag it in. And when I drag it in, you'll notice that the icon next to it changes so that it has a push pin in it, indicating that an occurrence is in use in the document. So you'll notice the same with the signal. The cursor is located at that point that I defined as the origin, and I can hit the A and the S button on my keyboard to rotate it. So I'll go ahead and place that. And now if I select that block, you'll notice up here at the top it has a drop down for the view. Because there are two different views for that block, I can just switch between the open and the closed view right from this drop down, and you'll see it updates the view. Now to add the block, you can either add it at the occurrence, in which case it won't be associated with the block. It'll just be displayed as a graphic object with text properties. So that's what we'll look at first. Underneath the block command, there's a drop down, and you can select the block label. And now I'll just give it a name. And then I can place a value if I want. If I don't place a value, then it will go ahead and just display the name. And because it's not associated with the block, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'll just go ahead and place this one. And then you can align it to wherever you want with respect to the block. And because it's not associated, you'll notice that I can select the actual label, and I can move it wherever I want. And I can even select the block and move it wherever I want. They aren't linked together. So in order to keep that label with the block, you can open up the master of the block just by double-clicking on it. We'll zoom out a little bit. And now you can place the block label here, and that will keep the label associated with the block so that when you place the block, it automatically places the label with it. Now, if you were to dissolve the block, then that label would just become the text the same way as if you had placed it in just the occurrence. So we'll go ahead and create a label for this. And now I'm going to change some of the options over here. If you want to use the same value for all of the occurrences, you can mark this option, or you can have it place different values for each occurrence. And I'm also going to lock the position within the block. And now for the value, I'm going to go ahead and put in just a number. And because I'm not using the same value for all the occurrences, and I have the option checked to ask for the value when you place the block, I can go ahead and use this to easily number all the occurrences of a block. So that makes it nice if you're placing, circuit elements or valves or even switches, and you want to number each occurrence of that block. So I'll just go ahead and accept that, and I'll place this label. And you'll notice that it displays the name in here. So if I close that block and then look at it in the library, you'll notice that the preview now has the name of the label, but that actual occurrence has the value. So if I drag in another occurrence of that and place it, it brings up this window asking me to either accept the value that it has or change that value. So I can go ahead and change that to switch number 2 and hit OK, and it will place the label as switch 2. That's pretty much all for the schematics. Just to kind of recap what we went over, we talked about how to create blocks from geometry, how to place blocks that are located in a library, and how to place Autocad blocks. Then we also went over the connectors and the labels that you can place. All of our lunch bites, we have replays of them up on YouTube, so if you missed part of it or want to see it again, you can log on there and view them. We also offer training. We have a 5-day fundamentals course and a 4-day update course. We also have other classes that you can take. These are the dates for those. You can also go to our website to find out more information about the different training classes that we offer. I want to thank you for your attention this afternoon. I hope that you found this session to be informative. Please email us if you have any suggestions for future Lunchbyte topics. We want to keep these sessions informative and useful for you guys. You can also email us with any questions that you might have had during the session. Once again, thanks. Have a great day.